Happening now on Grid Tonight. Kurt Busch is hanging up the helmet after trying to come back from a concussion as IndyCar driver Simon Pagenaud continues to recover from his own. Can anything be done to decrease the chances of a driver suffering a concussion in a crash? Juri Vips, the Estonian driver, is getting a second chance to have a career in motorsports. What should we expect from the ex-Red Bull back driver in IndyCar, and has he done enough to show that he deserves a second chance based on a terrible mistake he made last year? Hello to all our viewers here in the United States and around the world. Welcome to Grid Tonight, your weekly motorsports news program. I'm Kobe Lambert from the Podium Finish. With me, Isha Zing making her Grid Tonight debut. Welcome, Isha, and Ben Snyder. We encourage everyone to comment in the chat below, ask questions, and consider supporting us through the Super Chat feature. Now, Isha, take it away with our top story this evening.
Thank you, Kobe. Now time for our top story. Last Saturday at Daytona International Speedway, 2004 NASCAR Cup Series champion Kurt Busch announced his retirement from racing. And this comes after a 23-year career that ends with 34 career Cup Series wins, plus 2 Crown Jewel wins in the Daytona 500 and the Coca-Cola 600. Kurt Busch also attempted the double in 2014 when he ran the Indianapolis 500 and the Coca-Cola 600 on the same day. Busch ended up getting a strong 6th-place finish, and after struggling to recover from a concussion he suffered in a crash at Pocono Raceway last year, Busch's doctors eventually came to the conclusion that getting him back behind the wheel at 100% would not be a possibility. Photo taken by James Gilbert from Getty Images. Now, Ben, starting with you, how difficult must it be for Kurt Busch to accept that he'll never race again? And do you think he and Dale Earnhardt Jr. have convinced other drivers, regardless of the racing series, to take brain injuries more seriously?
Yes, absolutely they have. I'll talk about Kurt here for a minute, but I do want to touch on Dale as well. But I imagine it's got to be so tough for Kurt. You know, I mean, you saw it in the emotions of the announcement he made last year in Las Vegas. You saw him in the announcement he made this weekend at Daytona. I know he has worked so hard to come back from a crash that honestly did not look that serious. And I think kind of highlighted the concerns that all of us have had with this next gen car since it debuted last year. And for Kurt to, you know, be forced to step away for good at this point, the fact that it's been over a year since the crash and he still doesn't feel like he's at 100%, his doctors say there are too many hurdles for him to get back to 100%, has got to be such a tough pill to swallow. But at the same time, I have to commend Kurt, because I think if this had happened, say, 20 years ago, I think somebody in Kurt Busch's shoes might have decided, you know what, maybe 90% is good enough. Maybe I can tough it out and go back out there and see what I can do. And I might not be fully back 100%, but I'm good enough to go back out there and race. And then if there's another accident in a similar fashion, then, you know, we don't even want to think about the kinds of outcomes that could happen if that ends up being the case. So for Kurt to be mature enough at this point in his career to step back and say, you know what, I'm a Cup Series champion. I've won the Daytona 500. I've accomplished so much in my career. It's okay. I can be at peace with stepping back and getting out of the race car and focusing 100% on my health. I think that's very, very great to see. And in talking about Dale Earnhardt Jr. as well, this isn't like a paid endorsement or anything, but I just want to highlight the book that Dale wrote a few years ago, Racing to the Finish. It is a must read. It should be required reading for any athlete and honestly any person that's ever had to deal with lingering concussion symptoms or dealt with a concussion in their careers. Dale was so open and honest about what it took to get back on the racetrack, how it's different from 20 years ago when the mindset was kind of just go in a dark room, put a washcloth on it, sleep it off, and you'll be back ready to go the next week. And Dale had a couple concussions early in his career where he didn't miss time. He didn't have to take time off. And then when he got into his late 30s, early 40s, had the incident in 2012 that caused him to miss a couple races. And then obviously the series of concussions in 2016 that forced him to sacrifice a year, really half a year of his career. And honestly, I think Dale probably wanted to keep racing a little bit longer than he did, at least full time. I know he comes back and does his 1 or 2 Xfinity races every year. But for Dale to be so open and honest about his journey and what it takes to recover from these injuries and why it's so important to take these injuries so seriously, I think he deserves a lot of credit for that as well. And Kurt Busch being the same way. He has, Adam Lemery said, completely agree. I've read Dale Jr.'s book, fully enjoyed it. 10 out of 10, absolutely. Highly recommended to everybody watching here. Everybody who hasn't read it yet, go pick it up. It's a must read. But again, just drawing it back to Kurt, you know, it's certainly an emotional week for him. I think we all kind of knew at this point that it was unlikely that we'd see him at least full time again in a race car. But at the same time, I think you have to commend him and give him a lot of credit for being mature enough to make this decision and recognizing that all good things must come to an end. It's just a little unfortunate that it's come to an end a little bit sooner than Kurt expected. And our own Joe Samaniego saying, hearing Kurt's situation reminded me of Neil Bonnet's situation in the 90s. And I think that's a good point as well. We've certainly come a long way in terms of safety, not just in terms of how safe the cars are, but also when injuries do happen, and concussions in particular happen, how we treat them and how we go about the recovery process to get back into the race car. I think we've come a long way, but there's still a long way we can continue to come. And I guess we'll talk about that here right now with Simon Pagenaud.
Yeah, Ben, you brought some great points. And with Busch's retirement coming in recent days from lingering effects due to a concussion, that brings us to Meyershank Racing's Simon Pagenaud, who was ruled out of the final 2 IndyCar races. Now, Tom Blomqvist is getting a head start on 2024. He will be in the number 60 Honda at Portland and Laguna Seca, hoping to get some additional experience after not completing a lap of the race at Toronto. Now, here we have a statement from Simon Pagenaud saying, I have been working with an excellent team of doctors and I have made progress. The doctor's advice is for me to take more time to continue my way back to 100%, so I will not be racing the final 2 races of the 2023 season. The accident left me with lingering post-concussion symptoms. I am working hard to get back to 100%, but this type of recovery is unique in time to each individual. I wish I could be out there doing what I love and driving my race car, but the accident was very violent and left me to focus on the task at hand, my health and recovery. I will be watching the end of the IndyCar season and wish good luck to everyone involved in this closing of the championship. Now, the 39-year-old Frenchman will end up missing the final 8 races of the 2023 NTT IndyCar Series season, with his future up in the air and no timeline for his return. Kobe, starting with you, back when he had his crash at Mid-Ohio, did you ever imagine that would be the last time we'd see Pagenaud in an Indy car this year?
I hope that's just this year. I hope it's not the last time we've seen Simon Pagenaud in an Indy car in forever. But yeah, I didn't think he would be out for this long. It just goes to show how violent that wreck was. I remember when we all saw it happen at first, that was a really nasty tumble. Unfortunately, when the brakes go out like that, there's really nothing you can do in those situations. And Pagenaud was basically just a passenger along for the ride there. It was great to see him get out of the car. He obviously looked very shaken up there. And when they rolled him out at Mid-Ohio, we thought it was just, precautionary, not to rush him back too soon. And then we saw he miss the next race, and we're thinking, oh yeah, they're still just taking it easy on him. And then as one race turned into 2 races, turned into 3, and now we're up to 8. It just really shows, how serious this concussion was for Simon Pagenaud. And I'm also really glad that his medical team, the IndyCar medical team, they're deciding to, be very cautious and make sure that he fully recovers from this. Like Ben was saying, the mindset is completely shifted compared to it was 10, 15, 20 years ago when it was I remember it was, I believe it was Davey, Allison back in the day. It was him or Ricky Rudd. They had their eyelids taped up after it was completely swollen. It was either one of them, but that's what it was back in the day. You had to be tough, and if you didn't get back out there on the track, everybody considered you weak. But nowadays, a lot more drivers are seeing they need to take care of themselves, take care of their health, because at one point there comes a time, there's life after racing, and you want to make sure that life after racing is going to be as healthy as it can possibly be. And certainly wishing the best for Simon Pagenaud. I'm sure it must be hard for him, missing these final few races of the season, not knowing if Meyershank Racing is going to give you another chance to come back. And as you mentioned, he's 39 years old, almost a 40-year-old man. And so he's a lot closer to the end of his racing career than he was to the beginning. So we have no idea what's going to happen next with Pagenaud's racing career. But the most important thing is him getting back to 100% so he can live a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, Kobe, I think it was Ricky Rudd that had the eyelids taped open. I think Davey Allison was the one that had the sunglasses on, and he said, if you want to see it, I'll show it to you, but it's ugly. And he took his sunglasses off, and his eyes were just
it was Ricky Rudd.
Bloodshot red. Yeah. And I mean, either of those instances are very good points, and just the dichotomy of how we treated those injuries back then. I'm thinking of Dale Earnhardt, racing with a broken collarbone as well. I mean, it's not just the head injuries. Drivers used to rush back as quickly as they could because they didn't want to miss a single race. Now we take those things a lot more seriously because we know a lot more of the long-term effects. And Simon Pagenaud is doing just that and taking his time. And I've got to be honest, I did not know Simon Pagenaud turns 40 next year. If you had asked me how old Simon Pagenaud is, I probably would have said, I think he's in his mid-30s, probably about 35. It doesn't feel like he's been around that long, and I guess it's because he hasn't been in the IndyCar Series that long. He did one season of Champ Car when it was in its dying days right before the merger, and did some sports car racing. I remember first time I heard his name was when he came back to the IndyCar Series in 2012 in that 77 Schmidt car that Dan Weldon had been killed in just a few months earlier at Las Vegas, and carrying on that number for that team and doing quite well, and then getting his big break with Penske, winning a championship, winning a 500. Now struggling a little bit to get up to speed with Meyer-Shank Racing over the last couple of years, but I never, like you mentioned, Kobe, never would have imagined that crash in Mid-Ohio, as bad as it was, as serious as it was, when I heard head injury, when I heard concussion, I was again thinking, maybe 2 or 3 weeks and hopefully he'll be back in the car. Obviously, it's been a lot more than that, and just hope that Simon's doing okay with his recovery. It sounds to me like this isn't going to be a Kurt Busch situation. He sounds hopeful that he's making good progress and can get back in the car eventually. But again, with every passing week that goes by with another statement like this or another update that says, we're making progress, but I can't get back in the car yet, I'd be lying if I said the Kurt Busch memories aren't coming flooding back from last year when he was going through his situation. So certainly hope for the best for Pagenaud. And I, like you, Kobe, completely echo your statement. I hope that this is not the last time that we've seen him in an IndyCar, because I still feel like he has, even though, like you mentioned, at the twilight of his career, closer to the end of a career than the beginning, I still think he has a couple of good years left to give. And I think that there are a lot of IndyCar teams out there that would love to have a driver like Simon Pagenaud in one of their cars.
Yeah, definitely, Ben. And looking at his results last season, Pagenaud actually had some decent results at several races for Meyer-Shank Racing. But this year, as we know, the teams had a really down year. Both cars have not performed like they did in 2022. So if Meyer-Shank Racing were to make a complete overhaul of their IndyCar program over the offseason, especially looking at the sports car side of things, looking kind of murky over there. Not sure what their 2024 plans are going to be in prototype or even IMSA in general. If they do like a complete overhaul of the IndyCar program, maybe they can get a little bit closer to where they were in 2022 and maybe a little bit better than that, because Simon Pagenaud showed last year that he could get results with Meyer-Shank Racing. Obviously not the same results he could get when he was a driver for Team Penske, but, at least respectable results instead of what we saw from him this year. Even in the races we saw Pagenaud competing, he didn't look like the Simon Pagenaud we've all grown to see over the years. He looked like a shell of his former self. I'm sure a lot of it had to do with the cars. We see both of those cars not running well. Pagenaud was outside of the top 20 in points, I believe, at the time of this concussion. So I agree with you. I really think Pagenaud still has a lot to give in his racing career if it's in the right situation.
Yeah, we all wish Simon Pagenaud a great and healthy recovery. And here we have a comment from one of our own. Hey, team, hand pink waving. Yeah, and now, it's time for our second story. So after Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan Racing parted ways with Jack Harvey and had Connor Daly fill in last weekend at Gateway, they're going to give ex-Formula 2 driver Juri Vips a chance to finish out the year in the number 30 Honda. This will be the Estonian driver's debut in the NTT IndyCar Series after testing with RLL last fall at Sebring and again in the spring at Barber. Now, Vips has also been integrated with the team throughout the season by performing static simulator testing. And during his time in F2, Vips won 3 races, swept both sprint and feature races at Baku, then took a sprint race win at Monza. Vips also mentioned familiar faces that he'll be racing against, including former teammate Marcus Armstrong, Christian Lundgaard, Alex Palou, and Calum Lott, photo courtesy of RLL. Now, Ben, here's a question for you and Kobe both. How much pressure will Vips be under to show what he can do in 2 races after being out of the driver's seat since late 2022?
He'll be under a lot of pressure, but I think the pressure is going to come from the incident that happened. I don't know that it's going to be necessarily a racing sort of thing. He's coming in with Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan Racing, who have bounced back a little bit, but obviously had a very difficult Indy 500, and I think still are not at the level that they want to be. And he's only coming in here for 2 races at the end of the year. So I don't know that, if he goes out and finishes 17th and 19th in these 2 races, I don't know that we're going to think much of what that could mean for a potential IndyCar career in his future. I think what's going to happen is Juri Vips is going to have to make it clear that he's done his homework. He's educated himself. He's taken the time away based on what happened last year off the track to better himself off the track. And then we'll see what comes on it. But I'll leave that to the second part of this segment and see what Kobe has to say about Juri Vips here.
Yeah, Ben, I totally agree that most of the pressure for Juri Vips is going to come from the outside world. And as you alluded to, we're going to get more into that in just a little bit. We've already seen people who are opposed to having Juri Vips come into the IndyCar Series because of what happened last summer on Twitch. But looking at the racing aspect of this first, I don't think we should have a lot of expectations of Juri Vips in that number 30 Honda. But it's a good thing that he's been integrated with this team. Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan all year, got to test the car twice, and then been on the simulator. So he knows the team, knows all the personnel there, knows how the team operates. I think that'll serve him well for this weekend. And the last time Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan Racing had a young driver from the road to F1 scene come around, it was Christian Lundgaard. Everyone remembers his very first IndyCar race weekend, ended up getting into the Firestone Fast 6, really surprised a lot of people. And if Juri Vips is able to do the same thing, a lot of people are going to be looking at him, be like, wow, this guy is really talented. And I mean, he wasn't a Red Bull Junior driver for nothing, because Dr. Helmet Marco Christian Horner thought a lot of Juri Vips. And it seemed like he was going to be on the path to Formula One if it wasn't for that incident that we're going to talk about in a little bit happened last summer. But if I was Juri Vips, I would actually be kicking myself right now if it wasn't for that incident. As we all saw, Daniel Ricciardo suffered the injury at the Dutch Grand Prix, and who replaced him? It was Liam Lawson. And before Liam Lawson, who was the top Red Bull Junior driver? It was Juri Vips. So if it wasn't for the incident last year, maybe that could have been Juri Vips making his Formula One debut and not Liam Lawson. So that right there could be a lesson for the young Estonian driver. But certainly, I'm sure he's excited to get back behind the wheel of a race car since it's been a while.
Now, speaking of pressure on Juri Vips, it's time to address the elephant in the room. So Vips used to be a Red Bull Junior driver, Kobe, as you mentioned, on the road to Formula One. However, that came to an end when he used a racial slur on Twitch in early summer 2022. Now, although he was allowed to complete the 2022 F2 season, he didn't have Red Bull support through the end of the year. In the press release, Vips said he's very thankful to Bobby Rahal for giving him a second chance. But as we've seen, there are quite a number of people who believe he's undeserving of another chance in motorsports. Kobe, starting with you, how does Vips need to carry himself now that he's coming out into the public eye for the first time in a long time? And do we as a society need to be more open-minded about second chances in situations like these?
First and foremost, I want to say that I want to direct people to racer.com. Go read Marshall Pruitt's article titled Vips' Road to Redemption. Starts with RLL. I think it's a very insightful piece, and I encourage everyone to read it, not just the headline. If you look on social media, you can tell who only read the headline and didn't read the article. Yeah, because Marshall actually had some really insightful things and some comments from Vips that I thought was, very, very interesting. I think first and foremost, carrying himself into the public eye, he really needs to show that he truly learned from, saying a racial slur that's offensive to me and others in the Black community. Show us that he's truly learned from what he did. And I would hope that would be genuine instead of, just trying to pretend like you've learned something and, just long enough to pass and get by. But after reading this article by Marshall Pruitt, it really seems like Juri Vips and his representatives have really taken steps to try to put him on a better path. Vips said that he's taken, like racial sensitivity training and all of that. He took one course in the UK when he was still over there. And then when he came to America, they said Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan Racing enrolled him in a sensitivity training program here in the United States. So he's had two different programs. And I definitely think that is a step in the right direction. But as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people are not going to be too happy to see Juri Vips enter the IndyCar paddock, as we've already seen with some comments online. Yeah, I guess you can say that Juri Vips is basically getting the Santino Ferrucci treatment, because after Santino Ferrucci left Formula 2, I guess this is how these situations are different. Almost immediately after Santino Ferrucci had his incident in F2, he almost immediately come over here and raced in the IndyCar Series. But Juri Vips, took some time away from being in competition, took these sensitivity programs, and now he's racing in IndyCar. I guess the difference here, like Vips had a lot more time passing than Santino for Ferrucci did. But yeah, it's going to be very hard for him. I'm sure this weekend at Portland National Raceway, people are going to be asking him about it. I'm sure the Rahal representatives are probably going to be preparing him to answer those questions and how to answer them, because we all know he's coming into the paddock with the black eye, and a lot of people, like you were saying, Isha, like as a society, we don't really see a lot of people open-minded about second chances in situations. I think you have to take those on a case-by-case basis on who deserves a second chance versus who's not. But with Juri Vips, it may surprise some people, but I'm actually going to give him the benefit of the doubt that I'm going to hope that he's changed, that he's serious about learning why you should never say the N-word in any type of situation, and that he's going to become a better person because of this incident. But in the future, if he says that word again, then for me, like it's a no-go anymore. So I would, in this situation, I would be willing to give him a second chance until he proves me otherwise.
Thank you for bringing that up, Kobe. I must confess I haven't read the Marshall Pruitt article yet. I certainly will after we get off the air here. So I won't comment on that because I haven't read the article, and I'm smarter than some people on social media who think that they can just see a headline and automatically know what people have to say. So I will hold on that here. And I echo Alex's statement as well. Well said, Kobe. I want to talk about Kyle Larson real quick, because I will tell you that there are people out there that think Kyle Larson should still be suspended by NASCAR to this day. I feel like if Kyle Larson wanted to, he could have rushed through the sensitivity training, rushed through the road to recovery as quickly as possible. And I guarantee you it may have been a start and park level truck team. Somebody would have given him an opportunity to come back maybe as early as the late summer months of 2020. But Kyle didn't do that. Kyle spent some time. He wasn't completely away from the racetrack because he was doing some dirt racing for his own team and his own program. But he spent the time to educate himself, to make sure he was going through the process in the correct manner, and make sure he was making it clear to everybody that he was sincere in becoming a better person and learning why what he did was wrong and making sure that it never happens again. And Kyle today is one of the most popular, most successful drivers in the Cup Series. He's a Cup Series champion. Some people consider him one of the best racing drivers in the world right now. Now, Juri Vips has a long way to go to catch somebody like Kyle Larson in terms of on-track performance here. So it's understandable that this situation, while I'm not negating how serious it is, obviously that word should never be said by anybody in any context anywhere, and that includes Juri Vips just as much as it includes Kyle Larson. But the reality of the situation is Juri Vips in Formula 2 is not nearly as big of a stage as Kyle Larson is in the NASCAR Cup Series. So Juri Vips, I think, has been able to stay out of the spotlight a little bit more. And again, maybe there are some answers in the Racer article by Marshall Pruitt, like you mentioned, Kobe. I confess I haven't read it yet, so I won't speculate or anything. But I'm just going to be honest. I haven't heard a lot of Juri Vips since the incident happened. So from my perspective, what would I like to see Juri Vips do? I would like to see Juri Vips make a clear commitment and show that he's made a clear commitment already to becoming a better person and learning from his mistakes. And if he does that, and if he proves that he's sincere, I have no problem with him getting a second chance, and let's see what he can do in an IndyCar here in the United States of America, the land of second chances in many respects. I have no problem with that. And I do think we as a society have to, while taking these incidents seriously and making sure that we forgive but we don't forget, time has passed. Juri Vips, if he's taking the time away to better himself, let's see what he can do. And let's give him that second chance. As you mentioned, Kobe, if he does it again or does something similar again, that's a completely different conversation that we have to have. But as of right now, I have no problem with Juri Vips getting this 2-race deal, as long as he shows he's sincere, because I think his off-the-track road to redemption is just as important as the on-track one is.
Yeah, and by looking at the optics of this situation, it certainly looks a lot better for Juri Vips than it did for Santino Ferrucci. Like I said, Santino basically rushed over to IndyCar as soon as his F2 program ended, but Juri Vips has kind of kept a low profile, stayed out of the spotlight, and he's quietly worked behind the scenes with these sensitivity programs and learning why this word, the N-word, is so offensive to, as I said, to myself and many others in the Black community. And in Marshall Pruitt's article, Juri said that he really thought that the N-word was just a swear word and that it didn't really, that it didn't mean what it actually means. So he said that was just basically ignorance on his own part, and he felt remorseful for saying that word. And now that he knows what it meant, he would have never said that on Twitch if he knew what he knows now back then. But certainly, I agree with you about us as society. I'm sure at some point in our lives, we make foolish mistakes, do some really stupid things, and we end up getting a second chance most of the time. But if every time we made a mistake, we never got a second chance or got canceled and all of that, none of it, like, what would the world be? It would just be an even bigger mess if we got knocked down every single time we made a mistake. And like I was saying, if Juri Vips goes out there and it shows that he's done all the right things, carries himself well on and off the track, like you said, Ben, I have no problem with him racing in the IndyCar Series. I'm sure a lot of other people will feel differently, as we've seen on social media, but certainly curious to hear what you all think in the chat room about this situation with Juri Vips.
And Kobe, just to bounce off that one more time, based on one of the things that you just said there, I think that and again, not defending the action at all, but what Juri Vips would have to say there, I'll take your word for it. In terms of just thinking of that as just another swear word, that's an indictment on our education system and how we as a society are raising young people all around the world, that they don't know why that word is different and the deep racist history of it. I think that Juri Vips saying that and coming out, and again, I'm not defending his use of it in the slightest, but if he were to say it again or do something similar again with the knowledge now of what that means and having admitted that he's educated himself and now knows why it's so serious, then I think it's infinitely harder, exponentially harder, if not impossible, to come back from that and get a third chance. Juri Vips making that comment, saying what he had to say and going through a road to recovery, no problem with him getting a second chance in IndyCar. But again, I think he has to prove that he's sincere in order to win the fans back over.
Yeah, definitely, Kobe and Ben. I agree with both of the points that you guys brought up. I think he definitely does deserve a second chance. And as Kobe mentioned before, if he does bring up the word again, then at that point, obviously, it would be a real issue because he has been educated at this point about it. But anyways, continuing now, Kobe, let's bounce it back to you. What more motorsport news do you have from around the world for us?
Yeah, we don't really have a busy motorsports news week, but I do have several NASCAR stories to share with you all. And that starts with NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series regular Carson Hocevar. He's going to compete in this weekend's Cookout Southern 500 at Darlington Raceway with Legacy Motor Club. Hocevar will drive the number 42 Sunseeker Resort Chevrolet, and he'll withdraw his number 77 Spire Motorsports entry from the Xfinity Series race to completely focus on the Cup race. He made his Cup debut earlier this year at Gateway and impressed a lot of people by driving up into the top 15 before a mechanical issue ended his day. Legacy Motor Club CEO Cal Wells III said Hocevar is a very talented driver with a bright future. Photo you see on the screen, courtesy of Legacy Motor Club. After Austin Cindric and Harrison Burton have endured challenging sophomore years in the NASCAR Cup Series, Team Penske decided to swap their crew chiefs effective immediately for 2023 rest of this year and the entire 2024 season. Cindric is currently 22nd in points, while Burton is 30th. Brian Wilson will be working with Cindric, and Jeremy Bullins moves over to be Burton's new crew chief. Wilson and Cindric already had past success together. They won a total of 13 Xfinity races and an Xfinity championship, including Wilson's first one as a crew chief, coming with Cindric in an ARCA race back in 2016 at Kentucky. Bullins will go back to the Wood Brothers, where he's helped that legendary team win its 99th race, and he was on the box when he helped guide a young Ryan Blaney to his first Cup win at Pocono in 2017. NASCAR also handed down an L2 level penalty to the number 98 ThorSport Racing team and driver Ty Majeski. Both team and driver lost a total of 75 points, which includes 5 playoff points. Crew chief Joe Shear Jr. has also been fined $25,000 and suspended for the next 4 Truck Series races. This means Shear won't be able to return until the Championship 4 race at Phoenix. The number 98 ThorSport Racing Ford violated the sections of the NASCAR rulebook that deals with the wheels and tires, specifically the valve stems. The right rear tire was confiscated before the race at the Milwaukee Mile. Shear was ejected before the race, while Majeski, he served additional penalties by having to start at the rear of the field, and he had to serve a pass-through penalty on pit road at the start of the race. And some news that broke A few hours ago, Reckley WAR and Matt DiBenedetto have agreed to mutually part ways at the end of the 2023 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series season. The team released a statement wishing DiBenedetto the best in his future endeavors, but they remain committed to their 2023 playoff campaign. With only one race remaining in the round of 10, DiBenedetto is currently 20 points below the cut line. Right here, Matt DiBenedetto released a statement saying, after careful consideration, I've decided not to return to Reckley WAR for the 2024 race season. I'm very thankful to have been a part of the team's tremendous growth over these 2 years. We've shared many accomplishments together, such as the team's first win, making the playoffs, 6 top 10s in a row, and much more. I'm thankful for the opportunity Reckley WR, Curtis, Willie, Chevrolet, and all our partners have given me these past 2 years and for believing in me. I'm looking forward to what the future holds. As of right now, I don't have any 2024 plans, but I'm exploring options in all series. Thank you to my dedicated and awesome fan base, as well as NASCAR and the whole industry, for being able to make a career out of what I love. So stay tuned to see what's next in Matt DiBenedetto's racing career. Next, gonna turn it back over to Isha for our favorite game, Pick a Winner.
Yeah, thanks, Kobe. Now it's time for us to gain some points. So we'll be choosing Pick a Winner for the MotoGP Sprint in Barcelona. And Kobe, starting with you, who is your Pick a Winner?
I'm going to have to go with the obvious choice. I lost my lead there. Got to catch up to Alex. So I'm going to go with Pekka Bagnaia.
Kobe, you're still doing better than me. I've kind of forgotten about Pick a Winner the last few weeks, to be honest. So I'm still down there in 8th place with 24 points. Is there enough time for me to leapfrog everybody? I doubt there is at this point. But with that in mind, Kobe, I think I'll just go along with you and not try to catch you. I'll go with you and say Pekka Bagnaia as well.
You know, I'm going to say the same as Ben here. I'm so far down the leaderboard that at this point, no matter what I do, I will not be winning or have any chances in the top 3. But I'm going to make that 3 for 3 and also go Pekka Bagnaia. And now it's time for our Hots and Knots section. Ben, start it off for us.
Well, to be fair, Isha, you only joined the team, a month and a half ago? So that's a massive disadvantage that you're right there. I've just been lazy. I haven't been getting my picks in. But we'll start with my Hots here. I hesitate to put it like this because I'm sure the Chase Elliott fans are going to rush to the dislike button, but my hot is that Chase Elliott did not make it into the playoffs. And I say that not because I don't like Chase Elliott or because I have anything against him or his success or not wishing him well or anything. I say that for the integrity of our playoff system, or what little integrity, in my opinion, we have left in our playoff system. Chase Elliott was injured in an off-track incident, missed a few races, got a waiver for that. I had no problem with that. He was then suspended due to an on-track incident and causing a crash that Denny Hamlin actually, I believe, mentioned on his podcast this week. He is still feeling the effects from that Coca-Cola 600 crash in some ways. He was suspended for a race and then given a waiver for that. And I could not disagree with that more because, in my opinion, when you give a waiver for a behavioral incident, whether it's on track or off the track, you render the suspension entirely meaningless. So the fact that up until, I guess, Saturday night, Chase Elliott was still championship eligible is just so backwards to me. And for all the people saying that, well, they hand out waivers like candy, why shouldn't Chase Elliott get one? I will tell you that there is precedent for this. Spencer Gallagher won a race at Talladega in the Xfinity Series in 2018. He then failed a random drug test. I know he was talking about in his Victory Lane interview, he was going to party like it was 1999. I guess he certainly did. He failed a drug test. NASCAR allowed him to go through the road to recovery. He missed a couple races. He came back, but they did not give him a waiver. So if it's a behavioral incident, as it was in the case of Chase Elliott, I do not think you should remain championship eligible. And I am thankful for the sake of the system's integrity that he is not competing in the playoffs this year. But I hope he comes back in 2024. I hope Hendrick can right the ship. And it's great when the most popular driver in the sport is running up front and competing for a championship, because that ultimately means more eyeballs on the sport. I know that NBC is certainly going to be disappointed to not have him in the championship in the next 10 races. I don't know what they're going to talk about, since that's all they seem to talk about since they came back was, can Chase Elliott overcome this deficit here and get back into the playoffs? But he hasn't done that, and I think that's a good thing for the sake of the system's integrity.
Yeah, great choice, Ben. And For my segment, for hots and knots, as this is my first time doing it, I'm going to skip the knots and I'm going to stick with two hots instead. So for my first one, I'm going to say Kobe did mention this earlier, but Liam Lawson replaced Daniel Ricciardo in last weekend's Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort. And I don't think enough people are talking about this, but I think he had a great run. There were so many surprises this past weekend in the Formula One race, especially with the weather and then the track at Zandvoort. I think Liam Lawson did great. He finished 13th. So that's my first hots. And for my second one, I'm going to be talking about Gran Turismo. So I was lucky enough to be able to see a sneak preview of it about 10 days ago. And I did make a whole review of it on my YouTube channel, but it was a great movie. And I really recommend all motorsports fans, you guys, the team, and everyone who's watching this show to go watch Gran Turismo. It was a great movie. And those are my two hots for this segment.
Yeah, you should get into the theaters. Definitely on my list of things I need to do, because I've heard nothing but great things about the Gran Turismo movie so far. And I was more of a Forza guy growing up, but that's only because I had an Xbox instead of a PlayStation. So I do need to play the video games a little bit more as well. But I'm very excited to see what's in store here with this movie, because I've heard great things about it, like you mentioned. My not, I know we talked a little bit about this on the Encore show on Monday night. We got an update on Ty Majeski and the ThorSport Racing penalty, and Kobe, of course, mentioned that here in his rundown of other motorsports news from around the world. Dustin Albino sent out a tweet. He says, Ty Majeski's crew chief Joe Shear Jr. has been fined $25,000 and suspended for the next 4 races. Majeski and the number 1998 team have been docked 75 points and 5 playoff points. Alan Cavana quoted this tweet, and here's what he had to say. For clarity, the 75-point penalty does not carry over to the next round. The point penalty is applied immediately. And since Majeski already has a win in this round, his points total no longer matters. In short, the 98 team picked a perfect time to be penalized. So I guess this is the theme of the hots and knots today, is playoff integrity and system integrity. You want to talk about a meaningless penalty. Now, I know people in the replies mentioned, well, if Ty Majeski doesn't make the final 4 of a championship 4, then that 75-point penalty will come back and he'll drop down a few spots in the standings, and that's fine and all. So I guess it's not entirely meaningless. But I mean, I know I make the whose line is it anyway joke all the time. Everything's made up and the points don't matter. But in this case here for Ty Majeski, this points penalty literally does not matter, because he's already into the next round and there's no effect, because the points are just going to reset anyway, and then we'll continue on with the playoffs like nothing ever happens. So it's just unbelievable to me that you can find a loophole like this. And I guess it's a penalty. I guess it's a severe infraction, but honestly, it doesn't have much of an effect at this point in the season. It's just such backwards thinking to me.
Yeah, definitely, Ben. And now that we're done with the hots and knots section, it's time for us to end the show. Back to you, Ben.
Thank you, Isha. It's a big weekend for us. As everybody knows, Joe Samaniego will be on site at Portland International Raceway. More on that here as we take a look at our upcoming schedule on Saturday. Grid Live pre-race will preview Formula One, MotoGP, and NASCAR. That will be at noon Eastern. And then on Sunday, don't miss a special Grid Live pre-race program previewing the BitNile Grand Prix of Portland, also at noon Eastern time. Don't miss our own Joe Samaniego's on-site coverage this weekend at Portland International Raceway. And then a doubleheader on Monday. Grid Live wrap-up will be on the air Labor Day due to the Cookout Southern 500 running late on Sunday night. And then my show will be back, Grid Live Encore, with a full recap of Xfinity at Darlington, along with Indy Next at Portland and more. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for helping us get to 690 subscribers. We are so close to another milestone of 700 on our road to 1,000. So help us get there. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so that you're notified every time we upload a new video or host a new show. And follow us on all our social media platforms as well, and visit gridranking.com. If you really liked what you saw tonight, you can take 5 minutes after the show to invest in the Grid Network through Patreon. Join Colin Deschelle, Mark Robin, and David in investing each month in the Grid Network. We encourage you to join this amazing group of people who keep us on the air and who allow things like Joe being on site at Portland this weekend to happen. Once we hit $500 per month, we can start doing that on a more regular basis, expanding our coverage by adding new members to the team and having our team on site to cover more races. Link to that in the video description, as well as buy me a coffee. If you'd rather make a one-time donation, you can do that as well. Get your name on the board and invest as much as you want. Consider buying a specific on-air personality a cup of coffee, and they'll thank you on the air. You can also show support by donating during our live streams on YouTube through the Super Chat feature. For Kobe Lambeth from the Podium Finish, for Isha Azim, I'm Ben Schneider. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.
Thank you for watching right here on the Grid Network. Be sure to subscribe and follow us all week as we are going to be covering the BidNile.com Grand Prix of Portland right here on the Grid Network. Subscribe, hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our coverage all week long. Plus, see some of our past videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interviewed people from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching.